So, let's start. You can take your seats and let's continue with our second and last talk for today. And I'm really happy to present Anton here. He's from Malwarebytes, and he will be talking about migrating legacy UIs with MicroFrontends. So, with that, no further ado, and you can start. The stage is yours.
Hi. So this is my first time using microphone in my life, so it's probably be confusing wearing that harness, but I guess it will be fine. So I work at Malwarebytes, and we sell cybersecurity. So when someone has some problem with their computer, they can buy our services and we'll solve them. And we solve them for personal use, for companies, and also we partner with resellers, and that's important for the stock. I am a software engineer there. I work with JavaScript at backend and frontend and solving different kind of simple and complicated problems. So today I would like to talk to you about one of the problems that we had previously this year and how we tried to solve it. So we have two legacy UIs that are doing mostly the same thing. The reason for that is we have business customers and we have service providers, the companies that actually resell our services. And both customers have separate UIs that for the 90% doing the same thing. So they just log in and manage the subscriptions, manage the endpoints, manage the devices. And business UI, it was created quite some time ago, and it's still actively used and bringing us some money. It looks like this. Our service provider UIs was created a couple of years ago as a simple proof of concept, which decided to try if it works or not work, if it will be profitable at all. And it gained a lot of success from the start. And we decided to proceed with it, and it's still bringing us a lot of money. So this is how it looks like. So if we check, they look basically the same because they're doing the same thing. Custom business UI just gives one business client access to the system, to the statistics, to the endpoints, and all the fancy functionality that we provide. And provider UI is doing the same thing, but for managed service providers. So they resell our product for maybe 10 or 100 customers, and they can manage all these customers in their UI. Basically the same. So how are we going through our release processes in our company for these two UIs? So first, business UI got the request for the feature, and we build and release it. Next, providers log into the system, and they don't see the new feature, and they come to us and ask why. We also want to have this feature in our system. And we decide if we actually going to build it, because it takes some time, it takes companies' resources, and maybe it doesn't make sense to build it for providers at all. But if we decide to build it, we go from scratch. The entire different team re-implements it for the different UI. From scratch, it doesn't reuse anything, because these two dashboards are owned by different teams, they are built in different stacks, so you can't reuse anything. From the UI perspective, luckily backend is a bit more in place. So it kind of doesn't make sense. You build something, you decide if you want to build it again, and you build it once more. And let's say you're an investor, and I am a startup owner, and I try to sell you this idea to you. Doesn't make any sense. You will say, like, go and provide something better. So let's try to solve it, and we'll probably be able to use MicroFrontends to get rid of this double work. How can it be solved? How can it be solved? So the first option is aggressive. We don't ship any new features. We build the combined UI for business and provider, the third UI, and when we're done, we proceed with the new features. But our company will never on earth allow that, never, because stop building new features and stop bringing revenue into the company, no way. So we need to find something else. Second option is lazy. Just do nothing, proceed like with the same thing all over again. We continue this to the separate teams, continue deprecation, and maybe merging these UIs is not a feasible option, but productivity falls down. Like we have maybe about 15 different modules in each of the systems. Each of these modules needs improvement. We build and release each module every couple of months, so it adds to our portfolio, and all this needs to be supported. Why? Like how? It's impossible. And with every new release, it's more and more impossible. Maybe we need something different. The third option is smart. It's a combination of second and first. So we keep shipping new features. We build them only once in one single place by one team. And we also create the third UI that is combined for business and providers. And gradually we migrate existing things there. Minimal extra effort. It looks like an ultimate solution, but how? How can we achieve that? And the WebPack Module Federation is a probable answer. So let me show you the timeline that we kind of planned for this migration. So in 2016, how do I use this thing? Yeah, in 2016, the business piece was born. In 2019, the provider piece was born, and from that moment, we have the deprecation. Okay, like that? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now in 2022, we introduced that new UI, Business Plus Provider. I don't know why I didn't place that label there, but imagine that it's there. So, and we keep building 3 pieces, 3 different UIs, but they are kind of aggregated in the same thing, like in this, they like tightly coupled into the like MicroFrontends approach. I will talk about that later, how we're gonna couple them. And next year we are this starts small, so it doesn't have anything in it yet because it's new. And these 2, they have some functionality and they're fat. So with each new quarter, we keep extracting things from these 2 and adding things into this. And when we are done with that, this business and provider gets completely killed, and we proceed with the fancy UI. I'm talking only about front-end, so this entire thing is dedicated only about to front-end. Yeah, API, underlying API, they have some differences, but mostly they're the same. So we get lucky, at least in this part. So then, when we migrate everything from this 2 pieces here, we kill business, we kill provider, and we proceed with the fancy combined UI. So instead of building another monolith, so this we could build it as another monolith and add another third UI to the bucket, which obviously doesn't make sense. So let's imagine that we have 3 modules: dashboard, downloads, and users. So actually, we have 2 modules, and we aim to build 3rd module, users. So instead of building it here, and here, how about extracting module, users module, and build it in one place? Like one place, one users module, and then somehow connect it to 2 legacy UIs and to the new UI. So if we do that, then this is in production. This is in production. This is not in production yet, and it will never be until 2024. But it's still been developed because we need to release it somehow and get rid of this 2. And if we're shipping new features and attach them to each of these 3 UIs, we kind of achieve what we are aiming for. We build new features, so we build them only in single place, and we dispatch it somehow with the magic, with the WebPack Module Federation magic to the 3 things. And then we, at the same time, we try to extract existing things into the standalone modules. So we had the downloads as the parts of 2 separate UIs. We extract the downloads component into its own module and connect it to the 3 pieces again. The same with the 3rd dashboard module. So in the end, we have these 3 empty UIs that just serve as containers for all the business logic that lives somewhere in the limbo aside from them. And what's the next step? Just kill to old UIs and proceed with third UI that is just the host plus zillion of modules. So let's agree on the terms. Before checking how the code for this may look like, we will call a thing host. So the shell UI, it's the module that just bears all other modules in it. So it's you log in somewhere, and that's it. That's the module, and it doesn't have any business logic because business logic is the client. So the client is this is a client. This is a client. All these are clients. One host can have several clients. It's maybe one page. It's maybe a set of pages depending on the domain. It's built and shipped and tested in isolation, probably by different teams. So they are completely independent from each other. So let's check how can we build that. And for that, I've set up some sample projects. So it's not our production code because I obviously cannot share that. So I've went to the roots of the problem, and I've implemented some simple UIs without any styles, without anything fancy to demonstrate this thing. So I have two hosts. So it's business, like it represents our business, and its second host represents our provider UI. This host is built in React. This host is built in Vue. It's how things are in our company currently. And we have two built-in modules in business and two separate modules. One is dashboard module. It's connected to both of the UIs, and this module is connected to just one UI. So this is the system that I've built the previous week, and let's proceed in the IDE, because I honestly tried to put everything on the screenshots. It looked ugly as my life, so let's not even get there. So, okay, now let's I have a lot of windows in the IDEs because each of the spaces represents each project. They are completely independent. So this is the first of the clients. I can. I have no idea how to do that. Okay, help. Actually, I will present the code a bit later. Now I will present how things look in browser, and then we'll get back to it, and you'll teach me. So let's run it. So we just npm run start. It's a simple React application. It's exposed on port 4000. And it will open the browser, and it's a simple dashboard without any styles. I'm not very proficient with CSS. That's most that I can do. So it's two-page app. It has this mocked simple statistics and some even more ugly detailed statistics. Just two-page dashboard and dashboard/more. App number 1. And we go and check app number 2, which is even more ugly than that. It's exposed on port 4001. Let's wait until it opens the browser. And it's just the devices table, some fake data, and another page with details, which that's really ugly. But it serves our purpose. So let's say you're the developer and you need to develop things. So this is a MicroFrontend in isolation. You can launch it independently, and you can work on it, you can view it, you can actually demo it at the stakeholder meetings without any knowledge of where it's connected to. So it's this client, it's just a page in the internet. And let's launch the host. It's host React. It's exposed, let's see, npm run start, and it's exposed at port number 3000. And it looks like this. So this is where magic begins. So first of all, the users module. It's built in here. So it's not a MicroFrontend. It's inside the same application. It's just a bunch of fake data. Settings module is also inside this application. But then when things started to get interesting, we go to the dashboard module. And sorry, I need to change something. It's this ugly thing with ugly CSS. It's for later. It's not for now. So I will need to recompile it. Yeah. So the dashboard. If we load the dashboard, so you see it's the same thing that it's that the same MicroFrontend. It's just rendered inside a different application. And if we navigate through it, it exposes its own pages, but inside other application. And the same thing with devices. If we compare this one, they look similar because they're not similar, they are the same thing, exposed in the same application. And that's how it looks like. And they are really stitched to each other. They can communicate to each other as it is one application. So I made a simple demo for that. So I click a button and the toast appears. So I click a button, there is a toast on the right-hand side. Click a button, so it just contributes to the toast, and then it goes away in a second. So I can display like 3 toasts, and then they will go away. And then we go to the MicroFrontend. And this button also displays the toast. So I click it, and it displays the toast from the MicroFrontend in the shell app. So this button is in the host app, it displays the toast. This button is in the MicroFrontend, it displays the toast. So they somehow MicroFrontend can communicate with the parent, but it's not tightly coupled with it. Okay, now let's go to the more ugly side and launch another host, which is the Vue application. I worked with Vue.js maybe more than a year ago, so when I was preparing this demo, I was quite amazed how progressive Vue.js is now. So I guess it starts on this port. So Vue.js is even simpler. It has just the main page. It's inside this live data. It's also a page with a header and some text, and then the dashboard. The same, this one. So that's React application mounted into the Vue application, and it's stitched to it like I stitched to React applications. And everything else is the same. We render that application inside of another application. And with this approach, we have one source of truth, one module that is dispatched to 2 different applications. And that's kind of what we need to achieve. And let's see in the code how did I achieve this magic. So let's first go to the PowerPoint briefly to this diagram. So in order to build MicroFrontends, what kind of knowledge needs this component, host component, to have to be able to do this thing? So it needs to have 2 things. First thing, it needs somehow to know that this and that they exist. We need to deliver the knowledge that you need to go somewhere to some specific URL. In our case, it's like localhost colon 4000 or 4001, and get something from there. So that's knowledge number 1. Knowledge number 2 is what to do with it. So okay, I went here and I got something from here, and now I need to use it. So we need to implement a second thing to learn to teach it how to use it. So knowledge number 1. Now you can tell me about the presentation mode. Yeah. Okay. Enter presentation mode. Okay. Okay, let's see. Presentation. Arrow down, presentation mode. Okay. Okay, help and the search. So, okay, cool. Nothing happened. I think let's try without presentation mode. I will try to zoom it a little bit up. So let me find this host. Yeah. Okay, so first, let's observe the first problem. We need to somehow let the host know about where to go and what to do. So this is a piece of Webpack config. Don't pay attention to that Krakow stuff yet. I will talk about it in the next section. So now what we need to do, we need to add a Webpack plugin. It's an official, it's imported from Webpack. It's not some third party, it's official from the Webpack. And we import that Module Federation plugin and we tell that, okay, whenever you encounter that dashboard module in JavaScript, please go to this URL and please import this handle, like this module from this URL. So whenever our application encounters dashboard module, actual JavaScript module reference to that module, what it does, it goes to this URL and loads something from there, and then it uses it somehow. The same with the devices. Whenever it encounters the devices module, it goes to that URL and searches for this module. That's what is exposed at the host. If we go to the client, to one of our React clients, let's, for example, yeah, client number 1, and check its Webpack configuration, it looks similar. So it tells Webpack. So whenever the request for, so this is the module handle, the same that we were looking at the host. And whenever the request for this, this module comes, please go and load this JavaScript file. The same is whenever the request for this comes, please come and load this JavaScript file. And that's kind of it for the initial setup. So now we know that now this host has the knowledge, all knowledge when the application is loaded, that it needs to go somewhere to that 4000 port and load something from there. But then we need second piece of knowledge, what to do with it. And for that, we'll go back to the ID and check the host. So we'll go to where it's used. Its pages and dashboard. And so what happens in dashboard? So we lazy load some React component that is located right here, and we load it suspended because it's at the moment of execution that external file is not there. We need to load it as we need it. So while it's been loaded, we display some fallback, and then we render that component. So once it's been downloaded from that remote URL, we display it. Until that, we just display, please wait, we are loading that. And then we go to the connector, which the most of the magic happens. So what we are doing here? So we are exporting. So we're exporting that mount from the dashboard module, dashboard business. So that's the name of the MicroFrontend, and then the name of the component from there. So that import, it just lets Webpack understand that you need to go to that remote URL and load it, and then to export this something from that component that has the mount, like the mount attribute inside. And the mount is the function. I will talk about that function in a minute. So then when we enter the component, we just onload, we execute that mount function that performs some magic that I will talk about in a minute, and then it's kind of done. So we provide some basic setup, so some URLs. I will talk about this later because it's like this on navigate is one of the most important things in the entire setup, and it is mounted. And if we check what that mount function is about in the client, we'll see that. So we go to that URL, expose business index, and it proxies that bootstrap function where the entire magic, bootstrap function here, the entire magic happens. So what does bootstrap function do? It gets the element, so it's just a reference to an HTML element. And it performs some setup, and it says that please render our application to that element. Actually, I will need to close this bottom bar, yeah, please render all our application into that element, performing some setup and exposing some attributes. And that's kind of it. It renders another React application from God knows where it's located into our application. What's interesting here? We just render one application into each other, but that's not enough. We could easily, if it was just one page, we could possibly even iframe it and not go through all this hassle. The thing is, they behave like single applications. So you have this combined routing. So you go to the dashboard and it loads the dashboard route. You go to the dashboard/more and it loads correspondent route and that application. So it gives quite good user experience. So users believe that it's a single application. And for that, we need some magic with the routing, because if we just have two different separate React routers in the host and in the client, then we'll have problems because they will conflict with each other. Each of them will aim to change the current URL in the browser. So in the client, the router should always be a memory router, that kind of router that you use in React Native apps or for the tests. So it always should be a memory router. And then we provide some basic configuration from the parent, like base URL initial path, so that it knows its initial state, where to render it. And then we just subscribe for that history. And whenever we subscribe, we call that onNavigate function that we provide from the parent. And what does the parent, aka host, do in that onNavigate function is whenever some navigation from the inside module occurs, we check if it's if that next page is equals to the current page, and if it's not, we just call navigate. So actually, the navigation in browser happens always on the parent. Client just tracks things in memory and tries to deliver that knowledge to the host. And also, we subscribe to the routes to the host route, and whenever the route is changed on the host, we deliver that information to the client, calling that onParent navigate that is provided from mounting the application. So we stitch two routes together, and we make sense that they exchanging the information, that whenever the page is changed on the host, we deliver this information to the client, and vice versa. Whenever the route changed on the client, we deliver this information to the host. And the routes on client are in memory. The route on host are in the browser. They don't conflict each other because they're two independent routes that contribute to two independent systems. But there is a problem. If on your client, if you have this memory history on your client, how can you do the local development? Because it will not behave as a real application. You will not be able to launch it in browser and proceed with the pages, refresh the page, and so on. So we need somehow to differentiate the behavior when the application is a part of MicroFrontend and is embedded somewhere, and when the application is standalone and you're doing your local development. For that, we are doing this thing. So this file is exposed as a MicroFrontend. So whenever a host application wants to render the MicroFrontend, it calls this. But when you're actually doing the local development and running it as like React Start, it goes to the index file and it launches this. So basically what we are doing here is providing different router. So it's here we are using browser router, and when we are actually mounting the application from the MicroFrontend entry point, we are using history router. So it's two different entry points to the same application. So this is the only difference that we have between our instance, like of our entry points. When it comes to this application inside, now everything is the same. So we expose two entry points, and then we just go and render our application. And it doesn't know anything about what kind of router it uses. It just has the configuration, and the router is on the outside. So you can do local development, you can render it as a micro-frontend, and each purpose has its own setup. Now, I mentioned that we can expose the same micro-frontend to 2 different hosts. In our demo, it's React application and Vue application. And what if you need something to be done differently in this micro-frontend depending on the host? So let's say in one host we need to display something, and in other host we don't need to display that. And that's easily achievable because 2 different entry points. If we check the Webpack configuration, it's 2 separate entry points for each of the hosts. So React application loads this, dashboard business. Vue application loads this, dashboard provider. So we can provide different configuration for each of them. So the hosts still don't know anything about this configuration. It's still in this repo because it belongs there. That code base owns that configuration. But it's just 2 separate entry points, and it's achievable here. So let's check what's in the business and what's in the provider. So in the business, I just have this displayed copyright is false, and in the provider, I have this displayed copyright as true, and everything else is proxied from the host. That's why when we check this, there is a copyright here in Vue application, and there is okay, it's not running. I need to run it again, I guess. Yeah. Oh, it's running, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, it's running. So we have no copyright here because it's how it was set up. So about the toasts, how the toasts are displayed from the micro-frontend to the host application. They don't communicate directly because it's important. That thing should be always isolated from everything else because you develop it in isolation, you test it in isolation, and you ship it in isolation. It should not directly reference something else. So for that, this client, it exposes something like this. So we go to the Bootstrap, and we go to let's show the interface. So we provide a bunch of the options from host to the client. So it's base URL and initial paths are for roots. On navigate is for roots as well. And then it's just a display toast. So it's just the function that is provided from the parent, from the host to the client. And we provide this function, and whenever we want to display toast on the client, we just call it, and that's it. It's provided from the parent, and it contributes to whatever the toast storage is on that host. So, and for the local development, we just mock it with some console logs. So if here I don't bother to do console logs, I just display toast is an empty arrow function, and it just goes to Valhalla. Now, I think for the basic setup, that's it. And let's go back to the presentation because there are a couple of gotchas that we need to know. Everything comes with the price, and for this setup, there is also some price. First is React scripts. So React scripts is taking all your pain from you. You just type create React app, and it creates all the Webpack configuration for you. It does all the aliases setup. Everything is ready to use. You don't even need to lay your hands on Webpack. But we need actually to work with Webpack configuration. We need to that React abstraction is not enough. We need to somehow describe that. Please use that Module Federation plugin. What are our options? We can eject, but it's a nightmare. When you run that eject script, React states that please don't do it, but if you are a pervert, you can. So it provides crazy 1,000 lines of Webpack spaghetti. I don't know. I used to do some complicated Webpack setups back in the day when they didn't have this fancy shortcuts. But this is too much even for me. I injected once, then I saw it, I scrolled through it, and then I just did git reset hard and went a normal way. So what is our option? It is Krakow. So probably most of the React developers here had laid your hands on the Krakow. It's an abbreviation for Create React App Configuration Override. So actually, it allows you to work with Webpack configuration, but not eject it, just the shortcut for that. So whenever we need to extend or replace something, we can use Krakow, and it does the thing for us. And it's kind of aligns with our use case. We don't need to even replace something. We need just to add. And if we go to the IDE and check that Krakow config.js, so that Krakow config, it's how Krakow works. You expose some JavaScript file in the root of your project, and then you also replace this start build and whatever else you have in React scripts with Krakow, and that's it. So whenever Krakow runs, it hunts for this config, it adds all this configuration to the Webpack that is exposed by React, and the magic is done. So it actually tells, please, if you have the Webpack, you have the plugins, and you add this plugin to the configuration, and you don't need even to deal with that madness. So if you didn't use Krakow before, it's my highest recommendation. It's awesome. So we solved that problem with Webpack configuration. It's quite easy to solve, especially if you know where to look. But that leads us to the next problem that's far more challenging. This thing is, today is 2022, almost 2023, but this thing is giving us hard time all the time. So it's still in its basics when it's rendered in browser. So there is a problem. MicroFrontends are isolated, so this app is completely independent from another app, and if you didn't expose anything and you didn't describe it in the contract and you didn't provide that, for example, display toast function, you'll never be able to communicate between two frontends. You could if you just go through the global window, but that's not how the things are going. But with CSS, there is high chance that you will have troubles, and I will show you. It's actually, I did some teaser of that unintentionally, but now I'll do it intentionally. So this is our MicroFrontend application, and it's running. And let's say we have this, we'll uncomment this pollute CSS.css. So it's a global CSS. We just take that styles and import it in the bundle. And it has just some ugly stuff. I turn all the color pink, I turn the background red, and I apply my favorite Comic Sans MS font to everything. Not to everything, just to the navigation. And let's see what it does. So it's in the MicroFrontend. It's client React app. It doesn't have to do anything with the host. It doesn't have to do anything with another MicroFrontend. It's just the CSS that it's owned by its app, but it's applied to everything. And let's see what it gives us. Where it gets us. So we load our MicroFrontend, and this is the page that is owned by the host. It looks legit. It looks kind of I designed it. But when we load the MicroFrontend dashboard, shit starts hitting the fan, because out of the blue, that CSS keeps polluting not only that MicroFrontend area here, like it's pink, it's red, it's also pink. It gets to that host, and we have Comic Sans in the navigation, but that's even not the most extreme thing. If we go back, we navigate from that MicroFrontend, and it's unmounted. We go back to the users. Ugly style stays, so whenever the style is contributed to the browser, you gotta live with it. And it's even more extreme, because if you load another MicroFrontend devices, the styles also stay there. So once you have the global styles that are applied to your DOM, you have to live with them everywhere else. That's how unexpected problems occur. So you do the development in isolation, everything is fine, then you attach this MicroFrontend to the host, and then you get problems in the places where you even didn't touch, because the global styles sometimes collide, especially if it's just the common names like navigation or app, or if you just apply something to the body. So what can we do with it? Nothing. So if you use global CSS, then you're kind of in trouble. So you may use global CSS on the host, because in our cases, our hosts are kind of legacy applications, especially that's one from 2016, and we use global CSS there, and we cannot do anything with it. It's just will take a ton of time to migrate it to some other solution. But it's better if you are doing it from scratch, you better not use it. So client should always use isolated CSS, because if your host has a global CSS, but client has isolated CSS, it's kind of okay. You can just reapply all the styles that leak from host to client. You reapply them on a client, and then you kind of solved your problem. But clients should always use isolated CSS. For example, in React, I use these typed CSS modules. So how it does look like. So whenever I want to import CSS, I don't just import it in React, and then Webpack somehow extracts it and places it in as a global CSS. I use this kind of CSS modules. So whenever I write some CSS, it's just good old CSS. Then I apply this Webpack command that's called type CSS modules. Please go to this, find all these files that match this regex, and just do some magic on it. And what it does, it produces this type definition from the styles, and I use it like this. So I just import the styles, and I apply it produces the class names. So I not just apply the styles, I to the file, not just import them here, but I apply them explicitly. So please use this style on this class name. And this style, I don't need to manually map these classes. It's just, it takes it from there. It takes the type definitions of styles from the file that I write. And it solves the problem, because now the styles are applied to specific components, and they are not global. They are tightly prefixed like this. With Vue.js, it's even simpler, because Vue.js has this style scoped, and if it's scoped, then it works only for this component. Okay. So that's kind of it, but there are some topics that are out of scope of my talk, but still they are quite interesting to observe. So first of all, there is such thing as web components in Shadow DOM, and it probably will give a better way to solve the CSS problems, because since we solved it with the modules, it's still not it's not the cleanest solution, because we kind of trick the browser into thinking that this is CSS only for this component with all these crazy prefixes, but it's actually a trick. Probably we'll be able to do it better with web components in Shadow DOM. And also, if you start building this thing, you will encounter some issues. Let's say you have authentication. The thing that I showed you, it doesn't have any authentication. It's just a couple of pages, and you cannot log in there. They're in the open. But if you have the authentication, you probably will need to share it between the host and all the clients, and also make sure that when you're developing clients in isolation, you also have the same authentication, considering that you don't have the host. So that's kind of thing that we solved on our side. I will not tell you because it's out of scope, but it's interesting to look into if you are going to do that. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, I'm here. If you want to stay in touch, I'm not a very active social media user, and I cannot produce QR codes, so this is me. I don't post there, I'm just there, but that's the only place where I am at all. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Anton. Yes. And additional to questions on LinkedIn, maybe we have some questions now. You can raise your hand. Oh, wow, a lot of hands. I'm happy to see that.
I don't have question, but I have a proposal to put your code somewhere on the GitHub. So
yeah, I was thinking
we
about
could read
that.
it
So
later.
currently it's not on GitHub. I was thinking maybe I should put it, but then I don't know why I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I will do that. I don't know how to share it. Probably, yeah, I could share it on LinkedIn. That will be my first post on LinkedIn.
Maybe through organizers also.
Yeah, if I
message.
deliver that knowledge to you, will you be able to find it out to everybody else?
And also I will come to you and show how to increase font size.
Cool, that's really helpful.
So, yeah, more hands.
Hello. First of all, thank you for a nice talk. I have two questions. First one is regarding to performance. Did you do any measurement before and after MicroFrontends? I'm more interested in the amount of JavaScript code loaded into browser.
So actually, it's not a big amount of JavaScript code that's loaded into browser. So let's say you have, let's go back to the this fancy page. So this is MicroFrontends. So you have some JavaScript code that actually does this magic. And if you are having it's in the same application, just as a front-end UI monolith, you still have this code. It's the same components, the same amount of code. What kind of overhead this approach creates is that file that I've showed you in the configuration. Let's go here. So let's go even to the host and go back to the configuration. This is the overhead. So if we try to load that remote entry file in the browser, it will, oops, HTTP, not TTP. So it's just a bunch of minimized, uglified Webpack produced code that has all these connectors and has some libraries inside. So it's huge, but for the sake of demo, I didn't optimize it because this remote entry sometimes may have some libraries in it that you can share between host and the clients. Usually, in our case, remote entry just has the knowledge that please load this kind of component when it's referenced. And you may face a situation if you don't do any optimizations where, let's say, you have React on client and React on hosts, so the code of library. And if you don't do any optimization, it will be loaded twice. First, it will be loaded when the host application loads, and then when you click on the dashboard and it executes remote entry, it loads MicroFrontend and it loads React. But Webpack module configuration has a solution for that. It's called shared dependencies. So you can configure it in the same, in the plugin settings, just along with the remote file name and whatever else, and you will tell Webpack. So if you encounter this kind of library, React, we may even specify the version. Please don't load it if it's already loaded. And it may be tricky because sometimes you have different versions of React. Let's say our legacy application has quite old React, and our new MicroFrontend has a newer React, and we cannot share them, so we need to load them twice. But we are trying to solve that upgrading the React on the legacy application, because everything comes with a price. You either load the React twice, or you go through the painful process of upgrade the application that was created a long time ago.
Thank you. And second is that how easy it is to move to another build tool in the future if you would need it. Like there are new guys, with.js and some other one.
I'm sorry, can you repeat move to what?
How easy it is, do you think, to move to a completely new build tool in the future?
I don't know, because this it's called WebPack Module Federation, and it's tightly coupled with Webpack. So if you are planning to use something else, that may be tricky, because I think the entire setup of application code will stay because it's still 2 entry points, one for development, one for the module, and maybe for the host, and maybe third entry point for a second host. That thing will stay because it's just your application code. It doesn't have to do with the configuration, and it doesn't have to do anything with how you build it. You may build it with billions of different tools. The Webpack is popular. What will actually be differ is the configuration, and if the build tool that you are planning to use has this out of the box, you may end up doing just different configuration. Because I think it's also for the perverts, but you can do this, like you can write your own Webpack, so you can just tell. So if you can write actual production code. So if you encounter that module, please go to that URL, fetch the old JavaScript into memory, execute it, and blah blah blah. So it's not some magic that only Webpack can do. It's just Webpack. It's the most popular.
Thank you.
So yeah, another question here.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for interesting presentation. My question about the communication, such as between MicroFrontend and host. For example, if I want to, from the MicroFrontend, if I want to notify the host, hey, something interesting happened inside me, what should I do? I saw you have the callback, which allows to trigger the toasts, but let's imagine if a lot of interesting actions happened inside the front-end, micro-front-end. I can't. It is not a good idea to have each callback on each action. So, question about the communication.
It depends on your business logic, because on one hand, as you told, a lot of interesting stuff can happen in the client that hosts should be aware of. But on the other hand, there should be some event bus that notifies of the things. It's not like you notify of thing A in one way, about thing B in the second way. What we did, like with the toasts, is just an example, because
No, question is not about the toast. How you implement the event? What do you use? Event bus or what?
Yeah, so it's just event bus. So it's just a matter of callback. So let's say we expose a function, let's say send event, and whenever something happens on the client that you want to be aware of on the parent, on the host, you just call that function and you predefine some contract. Let's say that this event has some handle and the payload, and on the host you subscribe to that, and that's it.
So you have the kind of publisher-subscriber implementation.
Yeah. Because it's most important. You could do it. You could even do it in the global namespace. Let's say your window like event bus equals to something, and you go right there. But then you'll have problems because they will be tightly coupled. The main issue here is to avoid coupling as well, so that you can do your local development in isolation and don't have any problems.
Okay, clear. Do you have the issue related to the sequence of events? So just imagine the situation when it can be triggered it can be produced, but it can be consumed in the wrong order.
I don't know. It's just a regular event bus, because if this problem can occur between MicroFrontend and the host, it also can occur in one application, because it's a matter how the code is written. Because if I can also have the problem with event order in the same application, so I guess we need to solve that in its source on why it's consumed differently, and maybe we don't need to rely on the sequence at all.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, because maybe in front-end it's not a big problem, but in backend.
Yeah, but for backend it's completely
it's a nightmare.
Not applicable to the backend at all.
Okay, yeah, clear. Thanks.
Okay, cool. How many hands? I see. Okay, see one. Yep. You already had questions, right? Yeah, one more. Okay.
You didn't have a question. You had a suggestion.
Yeah, I didn't have a question. I had a suggestion.
So that's your first.
So looking on this page, I understand that the links to those micro front ends, they don't have some version hash in them. So what about caching? Like, are those micro frontends cached, or each time you load some page?
Actually, that's one of the
It's not
gotchas.
cached.
Because when it's in development, it's no problem because development servers, like they don't have any cache. But when you run this in production, what you need to do, you need to, which is deploy, you need to invalidate cache here because it's the only way to communicate. Because when host is loaded, let's go back to the diagram, one of the diagrams, somewhere here. When host is loaded, when this is loaded, it doesn't have any idea about anything that happens here, and that remote entry.js, it's only link to this, to the client. It's the only link. It needs to know exactly to what file to load. And for that, we just invalidate the cache on the remote entry.js with each deploy. We don't have any server. We just store a bunch of files in the storage and serve them as
so
static files.
So you invalidate server's cache or on the client side in the browser?
Actually, we invalidate the cache on the server, and when we distribute this file to the browser, we say that it doesn't need to have any cache policy. So
on the browser side, these files are not cached?
Yeah.
Even you don't use e-tag thing?
Yeah, we currently just have no cache policy at all for this file. This specific file, because it's the only link between the host and client. Otherwise,
so
it doesn't.
this file is small.
I'm sorry?
This file doesn't contain all applications.
No, it's just to, I showed you it in the browser, and it seems like a gazillion of code. Look at the scroll bar. But it's, first of all, it's not production built, it's a development server, and it's not optimized. So the essence of that file is just to deliver the knowledge to the host of what else needs to be loaded.
Okay.
So what happens when we load it? We load the remote entry. It tells the host, so please load this sequence of components. And then the components are loaded, and the components are chunked, they're minified, and they're hashed.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, a lot of questions.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Cool talk. My question is kind of connected to the previous one. Let's imagine, and I assume that it's like that, the host app is some separate repository, right? And different teams work on different modules. And then how it's all tied together in terms of CI/CD when we have new module created, how it looks.
So first of all, let's take the easy part. So let's say we already have these two modules created, and whenever we want to release some updates on the modules, they are released completely independent from everything else. Because as long as you fulfill the contract, that set of options that you exchange between host and the client, once that contract is not broken, what happens inside the application, it's complete business of this MicroFrontend. So we usually release it without even notifying the team of this team and this team. It's just release it, and because that's the beauty of isolation. If it's isolated, then we don't need to coordinate with other teams. However, the difficult part is when we are building the new MicroFrontend. Let's say this device's module didn't exist before, and we build it. So yeah, for that initial stitch, we need to communicate with the team of the host and say, please add another module in your configuration here, and also consume it in your code. So you need to create this component that exposes a connector. Then you need to write this connector, and that's the only thing that you need to do. So you need to go through this toil once, and then you enjoy.
But do we have to deploy first this module so that host will be able to download that?
Yeah, because if you don't deploy anything, then what happens is, I will show you what happens. So if we go to the one of the clients and we just kill them, it will completely stop them. And then we go to the host, and let's get rid of this ugly styles. So when the dashboard is not running now, so whenever I try to load the dashboard, it tries to load it, and then it actually fails, because if we check the network tab, what happens that it tries to, come on, where is it? It's not actually sure. So it tries to load remote entry, but remote entry doesn't exist, so it fails. And what it does then? It's in my implementation. In my implementation, it's client where the host a lot of So in my implementation, it goes to the error boundary. So this the error happens when loading the connector. It goes to the error boundary, and in error boundary we just display the message that we experienced the problem. So the worst thing that will happen if you deploy the host first, and if you have correct error handling on the host, that customers, when loading that module, will see an error message. So yeah, you always need to deploy the client first if you don't want to spoil customer experience.
Yeah, so some manual orchestration required.
Yeah, that manual, that first setup always requires the manual orchestration, because it's always like that. If you release some new component, new module, you need to go through the toil.
Cool, thank you.
So with that, I would suggest all further questions maybe can go to Anton directly. He will be here for the networking bit right away, yeah? So with that, Sasha, do you want to say some words as well? Yeah, I think we can finish it up right now, and then all of the further questions can go into speaker's corner for Anton. I think there's like a lot of questions and a lot of things to show as well. But with that, I just want to say thank you to you.
Thank you, everybody else.
Yeah. And yeah, Sasha, for some closing notes.
Yeah, just very brief. So first of all, thank you for coming. It was awesome. But in a way, the event is over, so we still have some time here just for mingling around, networking, asking additional questions, picking the brain, so no props there. And then around 9 p.m., we're planning to go to the Pohilakon for some, let's say, additional leisure activities involving beer. So feel free to join. And thank you, guys.